So last time we told you that you'd be getting Gail Carriger in on this next episode. We explained it a little bit, but unfortunately it's going to have to postpone for a week. And we'll talk a little bit about why. But hopefully you can enjoy this recap. And if you see something that you haven't seen before, you can go back and check out the other episodes. And we'll deliver Gail next week. Thanks for tuning in. What's up, guys? Welcome to the 10-episode recap of Worlds Asunder, or as I like to call it, Shady's too lazy to edit the next episode, so here's a 10-minute break. As always, I am your host, or one of your co-hosts, Shady. Joining me today is Haley, H.Y. Gregor. So we just got back from Dragon Con over the weekend. We spent a long weekend talking to a bunch of people, you know, the 5 people we've had on, as well as a few people that we've recorded with, but haven't put out yet. And a bunch more people who have agreed to do it. We just haven't recorded their episodes yet, but we got to see a lot of them this weekend. Had a blast. We're real tired, real cranky sometimes. And that really just kind of killed my editing time. So
the con hangover is real.
Con hangover is absolutely real. Instead, we thought it'd be good that for any of you who are catching us kind of later and you haven't seen the first, not all the parts of the first 10 episodes, we'll do a quick recap. Catch everybody up on where we're at and discuss like certain things, just kind of basic topics, genres. But so Haley, let me ask you this. What stuck out the most from the first 10 episodes of the show? What's so far stuck foremost in your mind on what's been said about world building?
Well, you and I had discussed going over some of the general themes that we've encountered, and across the board, there was one thing that came up over and over and over again, multiple times per episode, often, which was what Clark Rowanson called world builders syndrome. And it's a little hypocritical because we come in and we say, yeah, world building, this is awesome. These are all the cool things you can do. This is the inspiration, all these cool places that you can go look for ideas. But also, please stop that and go write your book now. Thank you. And so I think that that's one of the most important things. And we've seen a couple of different ways to kind of tackle that.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of a general theme. Like you said, Clark called it the world builder syndrome. I think Katie Cross mentioned the iceberg of world building, right? And how there's just a lot of stuff that goes into it. And, we started Worlds Asunder to help people kind of determine where to start, or even to think about like all the different aspects that go into it and, what it is that you can and can't get away with. But we're also here to help you, we're not here to help you stall from writing your book. We're also here to remind you that you still have to write the book. As I say, doing this podcast instead of writing, but there's that too.
Speak for yourself. I worked today.
You did. I managed to get some words in today. I'm proud of myself.
Congratulations. Anyway,
So world builder syndrome is such a big thing. One of the biggest pitfalls of world building, right? At some point you just have to stop and write, and kind of again, like what Katie was talking about, that you don't have to actually build everything out, right? Like you can make some throwaway one-liners. You don't have to know all the backstories, because later on down the road, you might need a different backstory than what you built originally. And so if you leave it more open, sometimes it helps. But on that note, speaking of Katie Cross, I know one of your favorite parts was talking about the world and story Bibles and organization.
Yes, I'm all about that. I'm all about that life, especially in shared worlds, which we've also talked a lot about. I think it's really, really critical to pay attention to those kinds of things. And that was great because it was really concrete. She gave us, for those of you who had the chance to go watch the video, at the end of Katie's first episode, she shows us her spreadsheet about Kara, and she has written over 50 books in that series. So if you're looking for organization tips, that's the one you need to go watch.
For sure. And that was episodes 3 and 4 of Worlds Asunder, which is like episodes 18 and 20 something of the Book Career Network podcasts.
You know what? I do not have those in order of the Book Career podcast, but I can go find out right now because I know that they were our episodes 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Which is me being incredibly prepared, and we will once again blame Dragon Con Brain.
It's all good. Peek behind the curtain. Haley writes all of our show notes and does all the like prep notes work because Shady is a pure pantser when it comes to podcasting and just makes it up as he goes.
So Katie's episodes are, her videos are episodes 12 and 17 on the Book Career podcast list.
Cool.
So if you want to go to my website, I have them all listed out in the Worlds Asunder list. So right now we've got 1 through 10, and you can find all of those and all of the show notes or all of the links that will take you to your preferred podcast poison of choice. Or you can go to the YouTube channel or the Book Career channel, and they're all listed there with the other weekly shows as well.
Yeah. And, you know, shameless plug for the rest of Book Career Network. There's some really good shows coming out beside ours. So if you haven't checked them out yet, go check them out. If you're just beginning as an author too, there's some stuff that is a little more advanced, but at the same time, there's stuff that's good to know. Can help you out if you're prepping to release your first or your 17th book. So, but kind of on that note too, as well, we'd be remiss if we didn't apologize, for the fact that the last 3 episodes videos have not been released.
I think it's 4.
It might be the last 4. And I know we had some show and tell with Clark, which we linked to, so you can still go follow along if you go find those things. However, we are working on it. It's been a process. They will come out on video. That has been, we've worked that out. And we are still going to keep producing video as far as I'm aware pretty much until Daddy Thacker tells me not to. And he's going to love that I called him that.
I have no comment.
No,
Clark's visuals were really cool, and I'm excited to share those. For those who missed that episode, he has the magic system blueprint, which is super cool, super nerdy, like my favorite thing in the whole world. And his blueprint is a grid. It starts with a grid that helps you break down the most important factors of your magic system. It is available for free on his website, which is linked in the show notes that I have already written. So, yeah.
And if you can't find the show notes attached to the podcast itself, you can always go to Haley's website, which if you look up H.Y. Gregor on Facebook, she posts about her website every week in kind of in tune with the release of our podcast, because she's been being very good about posting all the podcasts availability on her website as well.
I've got to be useful for something.
And maybe eventually I'll do it too. But no, so yeah, we talked about the magic blueprint stuff. We talked a little bit about magic with John Osborne, Oz, in discussing the Milesian Accords. And eventually you'll get to hear a little bit of the magic discussion that we did. We had a small discussion on magic with Gail Carragher, who will probably be, I'm not going to promise it, but more than likely she is going to be our next episode once I get done editing that. So we're real excited. We had a really great time with Gail, and she's real easy to talk to about a lot of these things. So we had a bit of a magic discussion with Steve Ruskin. And we've got one other guest for sure that I want to talk magic to, and then we may bring all 5 of them back if they will agree to do kind of a special episode down the road. But yeah, that should be fun. But yeah, so that's magic. We discussed going back a little bit to the world Bibles and the organization piece. one of the reasons why it does pay to be a little bit more organized, one, so you can remember what you did build out. That isn't just a one-liner that you have to go PDF search somewhere. But two, so we had Chris Kennedy on as our first guest, because he built one of the largest shared universes in science fiction, military sci-fi, in the Four Horsemen universe. He helped co-found it along with Mark Wandry. But also because, we both, Haley and I, are both writing in Malaysian Accords. And so we've been having our fair share of discussions of kind of world Bibles and the keeping up of things. And being organized early on helps a lot more. You got something?
We can talk about Oz's book if we want. So John Osborne is also an author in the Four Horsemen universe. So he writes both military science fiction and urban fantasy, which is what the Malaysian Accords are. So he had firsthand experience working with a shared world and a shared world Bible from Four Horsemen, and looked at that and said, okay, here's how I want to build it from the ground up. So he's trying to make sure that he guides it in the right direction. From that, though, we talked to him a little bit about magic, but Oz also has a nonfiction short. I think technically it's classified as a novella, but it's all called World Building for Beginners or World Building for Novices, excuse me. And it is phenomenal. I've read it. He breaks it down a little bit by genre and a little bit by topic, so it applies regardless of what you're writing. And it is not so long that you want to kill yourself 3 chapters into it. It is really digestible, and it points you in the right direction for wherever you want to go. And he has checklists and stuff in the back. Cannot recommend it enough if you're looking for a really straightforward place to start.
Yeah. And, between John, Katie, and Chris, they all discussed how tough it was to retroactively world build, right? To go back and recapture all of the details. Katie's still trying to catch up to her stuff. The 4HU discussion was that they fell so far behind that they just kind of capture the basics, and they hope that some people can fill in the Bible as we go. And then Oz has been catching up the 4HU because he's building the RPG for it, so he's been dealing with that. But one of the other guests, the final guest that we've released and haven't really touched on yet, we had Kevin Eikenberry on for the last 2 episodes, and he's a Four Horsemen core author. He's a alternate history writer. He's a former army tank driver / commander. He's been teaching space since he's
teaching space broadly.
Yeah, teaching space, satellites. He's got a whole lot of fancy words that I don't know how to use very well. But really, that was the thing that kind of led us to that episode was he also teaches story structure, and he's really good at research. And so having him on to discuss kind of alt history, historical fiction, the differences between, and the way to research things, and the way he researches and uses resources is not restricted to just alternate history, right? You find that it's a little easier and a little bit more necessary to do your research thoroughly, but not just restricted to that, because you can do research on, we talked about a little bit about how do we take a real world culture and transplant it into kind of a fantasy or sci-fi world, which will come up a little bit with Gail's episode and with Steve Ruskin's episode that we have episodes that we'll have coming up soon too.
One of the things that we touched on briefly in Ike's episode that I would love to delve into more in the future is using world building specifically to create conflict for the characters and for the plot. One of the examples in his episode that we discussed was maps and terrain, because the story that he wrote that we were discussing is called The Crossing, and essentially takes a bunch of modern day army cadets and throws them back into time during the Revolutionary War. So the terrain as they know it in our time is incredibly different from the terrain as it was, and the maps that we have are totally different, and the GPS coordinates obviously are no longer relevant. And so that in itself, by itself, the world building was creating all of these difficulties. And I'm sure there were a lot more examples that we touched on during that, and that we could delve into. And I think that that's something that is really important, because world building is not just a layer. It can be an active player in your stories if you're using it right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it is very world building, like helps you create those kind of like what you're saying, create those conflicts, right? They can create a storyline in and of themselves. Clark mentioned it with magic, right? Like, Katie's mentioned it with, some of the things that she was talking about when it came to, some of the tropes in her, what was it? Miss Mabel. Yeah. Alcara. There you go. She had mentioned that like some of those things come about because of the way she built the world, and the conflict wouldn't exist otherwise. If, magic is has and has nots, right? Like that creates conflict almost immediately.
Or tripping yourself up, causing conflict for yourself because you set something up one way and then 3 books later you'd like to do it differently, but you can't. So you have to either figure out how to change it in a way that makes sense and is acceptable to readers, or deal with the pit that you have dug for yourself.
Yeah. And, that might be the conflict itself, right? Like trying to figure out how to change the world. But all of them, I will say all 5 also kind of held to one other standard, which is, the easy moniker to remember that we talked with Kevin about is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Right? Like you don't need to get totally advanced. Now we have some people that we would love to have on that they will regale you with how much they know about politics, economics, magic systems. Like Clark was real deep in on magic systems. We've got plenty of other guests for that. Gail is, an archaeologist, who has done a lot of studies in cultural phenomena. And so she pulls a lot from there. But knowing all of those things and knowing what to include is a very different question, right? And usually keeping it simpler helps.
Well, and John's background, before he was a writer, he was and still is a dungeon master. So his background is in gaming. He's totally used to having players ignore the worlds that he's tried to build. And so dealing with that, learning what to include or what not to include, I'm sure that has shaped things differently for him than it has for a lot of other writers, because he has a unique background there.
Yeah. And we plan on having him back on to discuss a little bit of that background at some point. And we've got some other people lined up to talk about gaming. Not just...
Very excited for that episode.
We have some tabletop gaming guys coming on. We have some video game developers coming on. We're really excited about. If anybody, I'm going to throw this out there. If anybody happens to know how to get in touch with Dusty from Starset, please let me know. I've been trying to get a hold of him for a couple weeks now, trying to get him to come talk about especially the world they've created with their music. And I may have to bounce to somebody else because their contact form's not the greatest. But
or tell everyone you know about this podcast so that we become big enough that somebody at Starset will pay attention to us. That would be the next best thing.
So I would love to have them on to talk about that. I know we already have another podcast on Book Career Network talking about Taylor Swift's ability to tell a story, but we would like to.
Mostly marketing, though. That's the focus of theirs. It's fan engagement and marketing. Yeah, is the bigger piece.
Because their first episode was kind of talking about how she blends story in with the music, but
I'm sure that they're kind of touching all over, sort of like we are.
Yeah, but, I'm sure.
Jumping around because there's so much crossover.
Yeah, and speaking of crossover, we also did film with one James Fox at one point, who also has a podcast on Book Career Network. And those episodes will come out at about the same time that he releases the episode we did with him. So I'm going to bury that lead and you'll enjoy finding out when that happens, but I have no guarantees on the timeline.
We only spent like 4 hours in a video chat with James getting all of it recorded one night. So it was a marathon. Yeah. By the end of it, we're all pretty froggy.
Yeah. A lot like today, where we're just jumping around from thing to thing to thing. Whatever sparkles on the page of notes that you gave me.
Well, we've just been so lucky to have great guests. I think we're fortunate to have had so many great people agree to come on, and the variety, the spread that we've been able to bring up has been great. I hope that it's been helpful for people regardless of genre, or if they're writing adult fantasy or middle grade science fiction or whatever it is. We're trying to kind of catch everybody.
Yeah. And there's some people that we have, and I'm not going to start talking too many names because we haven't recorded them yet, so I don't want to promise something and then for whatever reason it keeps falling through and never happens. But we do have a bunch of people who've agreed, who've either told us that they're interested and we just haven't settled on what we're going to talk about with them yet, or we already do know what we're going to talk about. We just haven't scheduled a date to record yet. So we have a lot of really cool friends, really cool people who are excited to tell you guys about world building. So,
we have an episode on city building that we'll be recording in the near future as well.
Trying to remember
Surprise.
who that was. Yeah.
We'll talk later. Surprise.
Yay me.
You're welcome.
Anyway, so we're at 20 minutes. We're already a lot longer than I intended this recap episode to be. But that's all right. Just a lot of rambling. It'll be fun. Minimal editing, and I apologize for that. But don't worry about it. The video's not going to release this week, probably. So who knows? Yeah. Haley, any final thoughts on the first 10 episodes?
No, I think it's been a blast. We've enjoyed it. I hope everyone who's listening has enjoyed it. If you guys have stuff you want to see, hit us up. Let us know. You can find our contact information in the show notes, or you can find us on Facebook. If you have recommended guests, send them our way. We'd love to take a look.
Yeah. And if you could reach out to those guests ahead of time and be like, hey, would you be interested in doing this? So that way when I email them or Haley emails them, it's not out of the blue and they're not surprised. That would be wonderful. That'd be really helpful. And we'll even throw you a credit for connecting us.
Yeah, help us avoid cold calls.
Yeah. I'm cold calling a couple people because I know they're real famous, and we'll see what happens. Speaking of, just thought of an idea. We'll talk about it later. Bury that lead too.
I'm frightened, but intrigued.
Should be fun. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen?
They'll say no.
Yeah. Or we get blackballed forever.
Think of worse things.
Yeah. Anyway. Thanks for stopping by on the 10 episode recap. I will not promise that we'll do another one. I will promise that we will eventually have another break episode where we just sit, chill, and BS about the things we've talked about. But if there's anything that interested you there, all 10 episodes are currently up on wherever you get podcasts. Chris Kennedy is episodes 1 and 2 of Worlds Asunder. Katie Cross is 3 and 4. John Osborne is 5 and 6. Clark Rowanson is 7 and 8. Kevin Eikenberry 9 and 10. And we had a lot of spicy margaritas with Kevin Eikenberry, so that one got real fun, real quick.
Most of them were after the interview, to be fair.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, we were 2 or 3 deep by the time we got to the interview. But no. So if there's anything else you guys want to see us talk about specifically, something that we haven't touched on yet, or something you'd like us to delve into more, one, I'd ask you to be patient because we probably also want to, but 2, please leave us a comment on it. Patience doesn't mean that you can't comment. Just let us know that you want to see it, or if there's something you'd rather see. If you want to see more of certain things. If you're enjoying the show, comment and let us know. Like, subscribe, please, wherever you listen to podcasts. And that is a 10 episode recap of Worlds Asunder. She's been H.Y. Gregor. I've been Shady. And I don't have a really cool sign off line. We'll catch you all later.
Welcome to my world.
Thanks for listening to our break episode. Don't worry, we'll return you to your regularly scheduled programming next week. I know none of this is going to be news, and we still hope you enjoyed the recap episode if you watched it all the way through and took some good notes from the notes that we've been taking from our own interviews. As always, thanks for stopping by. Thanks also to Nick Thacker and Book Career Network for hosting this podcast. All the links we've mentioned you can find in the show notes where you can follow any of us. Next week, we'll have Gail Carragher on with Archaeology and Treacle Tarts, Part 1. I promise it's the real thing this time. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment wherever you listen to these podcasts. And as always, thanks for helping us tear the worlds asunder. We'll see you next time.